Hello everyone, this is Dr. Sunita Magre, Professor, Department of Education, University of Mumbai. Today we are going to discuss the approaches to curriculum development. In our previous video lecture, we already discussed about the curriculum development, basic foundation of curriculum development, and today we are dealing with the topic approaches to curriculum development. This is my lecture outline, introduction, approaches to curriculum development, teacher-centered approach, subject-centered approach, learner-centered approach, competency-based approach, constructivist approach, key takeaways, points for reflection, and the references. Objectives: the learner will be able to understand the approaches to curriculum development, understand the concept of teacher-centered approach and its characteristics, understand the concept of subject-centered approach and its characteristics, understand the concept of learner-centered approach and its characteristics, understand the concept of competency-based approach and its characteristics, understand the concept of constructivist approach and its characteristics. Learning outcomes: at the end of this, learner will be able to explain various approaches to curriculum development. They compare the teacher-centered approach, subject-centered approach, and learner-centered approach in terms of their characteristics. Explain the usefulness of competency-based approach of curriculum development. Explain the characteristics of constructivist approach of curriculum development. Here we have to discuss the main three approaches of the curriculum development. What are that? The major aspects of the classroom activities. There are the three major approaches of the curriculum: teacher-centered, subject-centered, and the learner-centered. And apart from these three, there are another two important approaches, that is the competency-based approach and the constructivist approach, which are increasingly being used in the present situation in the school curriculum. Let us start with one by one. Teacher-centered approach. Before going to the characteristics or the various titles of the teacher-centered approach, first we have to discuss of the concept, what is the teacher-centered approach. We are the teacher. Daily we are going to the classroom, discuss our students. Now observe one thing. I will give one situation to you. One of the teacher, he or she, whoever is, teaches in the classroom, and in that classroom she is using various methods of teaching. Sometimes she used narrative method, sometimes she questioning the students. So like that she is using the various methods. Some of the time she used only one method. But as a teacher, my view is teacher should be used various situations, various methods according to the situation. So that will be good for the student. So I explain one of the example for the teacher-centered approach. How actually the teacher-centered approach. Now, in the classroom, the teacher teaches in the classroom, And in that classroom, she opened the book, she read the book. Sometimes she used the blackboard, write something about the blackboard. Then she explained the various diagram, or she draw the figure, label them, and explain the things. Sometimes she uses the teaching aids, various teaching aids according to the content. And in between that process, the learner asks the question to the teacher, but that time the teacher is, sometimes she is angry or he is angry, or sometimes the teacher says, now do not ask the question. First, we will complete the chapter and then you can ask the question. Now, this is the situation of one of the classroom. Now, in this situation, we can observe here, there is in this situation, the teacher have a full control on the classroom. Means she conducted the various activities in the classroom. She asked the question to the student, but she didn't allow the student to ask the question. She allowed the student to ask the question after finishing his or her teaching. Now, in this situation, means there is a full control of the classroom of the teacher. This is the teacher-centered approach. Means in this teacher-centered approach, everything in the class depends on the teacher, and the students have a little say in any of the matter. Means in teacher-centered approach, the directions is given by the teacher and students are follow that direction. So this is known as the teacher-centered approach. Now, what is the purpose of teacher-centered approach? The teacher approach is to complete the course in the time, to complete the syllabus in time. This is the purpose of teacher-centered approach, because teacher is responsible for completion of the syllabus. That's why the teacher focus is to complete the course within a stipulated time. And in the teaching learning process, the teacher role is very, very important. Teacher teaches according to the content. But in this matter, what happened? When the teacher asks the question and students gave the answer, so the teacher said, now he or she is a good student. Means those students have a good memorization power, so that student is good according to the teacher. But in the other hand, those students are unable or incapable to storing, or we can say that recalling or memorizing. So that students are not a good student for this teacher-centered approach. Then pedagogy. in the pedagogy, the delivery of the information by the teacher. Teacher concentration is more on the delivery of the information. Very few teachers give the various examples, but some of the teachers focused on the delivery according to the purpose, completion of the syllabus. Then course delivery. Now in the course delivery, the teacher use many times a lecture method. Lecture method is very well applied in the teacher-centered approach. Assignments and examination are based on summative purpose. Then here there is a no unit plan and the no unit test in teacher-centered approach. Then the role of teacher is sage on the stage, and what is dedicated must be followed. Means the teacher role is, we can say in shortly, the dominating characteristics. Okay, so teacher, whatever the teacher said, suppose he said he write the 20 lines about that content or about that essay, so student should write the 20 lines about the essay writing, right? Then transactional modality, in this way only the teacher can provide the information. Teacher interact to the student, but she or he not give the power to the student to ask the question or interact the teacher. So here is the interaction is depend upon the teacher, and teacher only interact with the students, but students are not allowed to interact. Okay. Then classroom environment, sometimes it is democratic, but sometimes it is the control of the classroom is in the teacher's hand. One of the most important characteristics, the teacher is a dominant factor. Why teacher is dominant factor? Because the teacher is doing each and every activity. She is teaching, she is draw the figure, she explain the figure, she can ask the question. So that's why the whatever the teacher is saying, students are not active, they are in passive in nature. So the teacher is a dominant characteristic. Then memorization and the recall. Those having the good power of memorization and recall, the students are the good. Sometimes it is known as the banking education, like the Paulo Ferreira. According to the Paulo Ferreira, it is the teacher-centered approach is the banking education, because the teacher provides the knowledge or information and student can deposit their knowledge and information in the form of memorization. So that's why it is the banking education. Then learners' participation is very less. Then focus on the completion of the course. So these are the teacher-centered approach. Now the subject-centered approach. The subject-centered approach, this is one of the important approach in the curriculum. In subject-centered approach, the subject is more important. Subject is more important. So what is actually the subject-centered approach? We can go in detail form. In the subject-centered approach, the main focus of the delivery is the subject content by the teacher. For whom? To the students. Importance is laid on topics or the concepts included in the subject. It is a common practice in most of the school to strictly follow the syllabus and textbook, both for teaching and learning. The textbook in the subject is considered as the storehouse of all required concepts, various examples, and the exercise which are required at the time of teaching learning process. Now, we'll see one by one characteristics or what is the actual subject centered approach. The learning subject matter is an end in itself, means the listening to lectures, studying the textbooks, and studying for examination are all practices that show the influence of the subject-centered curriculum approach. The subject teacher consider it of great importance to cover the prescribed textbook, since a specific amount of the subject matter is to be learned in a given time. If subject matter has been learned, the teacher and the students feel satisfaction. Second one, there is a predetermined uniform standard of knowledge. Those who follow the subject-centered approach strongly advocate minimum standards. They advocate set standard for the class to be achieved by all students in order to qualify the examination. In other words, a time limit is placed on achievements, and if the pupil fails, the course must be repeated. The teacher attempts to bring the pupil up to the set standard. Thus, failures are required to repeat a grade or they are dropped out from their institution. The third one is practice in skill is emphasized. Drill in specific skill is one of the typical characteristics of the subject curriculum. Drill session, remedial work, review work, coaching classes are often devoted to such type of the drill. This drill is given in equal amounts to all people in the group or to all learners in a group. Emphasis is placed upon acquiring information for future use. The subject matter selected for a course is considered to be of value in adult living rather than child's immediate needs. Thus, adult problems are given more weight than problems of children in the youth. Progress is measured by how much of the subject a pupil has learned, as the subject matter is important thing to be learned. Learning is measured by how well the subject matter has been mastered. Frequent tests are given to check the extent of achievement by the student. Each subject is distinct with a logical organization of its own. Emphasis is placed on the acquisition of skills, facts, and information in different logically organized subjects. The members of the staff teaching different subjects do not plan courses together and they do not discuss common problems. Subject matter is selected by adults previous to the teaching and learning situations. As the subject matter is taught in logical, organized discipline, therefore the content of the course is selected before it is taught. For this purpose, they receive help from the subject matters, specialists, supervisors, administrators, and the textbook writers. Then what is the purpose of learner-centered approach? Each and every child. So next approach is the learner-centered approach. So what is learner-centered approach? The learner-centered approach means, I have given one example here. And some of the teachers in the classroom, they involve the students in the teaching and learning process. Means the teacher teaches, but they involve the students. Means students are actively involved in the teaching learning process. Teacher as well as the students. Means sometimes this teacher asks the question, a student will give the answer. Sometimes students raise the query and teacher will be solve the problem. Means this kind of the means there is a there is a understanding between the teacher as well as the learners. Means they are in the teaching learning process, they are collectively doing the work. So this is the learner-centered approach. Means here is the more importance of the learners, and they are actively participated in the teaching learning process. So we'll take one by one. What is the purpose of learner-centered approach? Here the main focus is each and every child should learn by doing, not only the listening, they are doing. So students achieve learning objective as fixed by the teacher. Whatever the objective fixed by the teachers, students can achieve that objective through learning by doing. Then teaching learning process, students learn by integrating new learnings into what they already learned before. Learning by doing is the base, and the teacher provides learning situations that give children an opportunity to learn through observation, experiential learning, questioning, and the exploration. Pedagogy, learning by doing based on engagement of the students through various activities organized by the teachers, and the teacher engages the learners through various activities. Teacher helps all the students to achieve the learning objective. Performance indicates mastery of learning objective, and the assessment is done to improve standard of the students, not the scoring of the students, but they develop some, they improve the some standard of learning. Then course delivery, here is the main focus is the activity based learning. Active learning and the activity based learning are the important part. Sometimes it is the cooperative learning, and also the problem based learning is in the practice. So course delivery is in the various form, that is the activity based learning, cooperative learning, problem based learning. So these are the various delivery of the courses. Then the role of the teacher is as a guide. Assignment is given for practices. Unit test is administered by the teachers. The teacher role is the facilitator. Teacher should work with the students according to their needs. Whatever the guidance is required for the students according to their need, so teacher should provide the facility as well as to provide the guidance to the students to achieve the better learning objectives. Then transactional modality, children interact with teacher, and not only the teacher but as well as the peers. Means the student interact with teacher, it is one of the part. Students interact with their peers, it is one of the factor. And the third importance, teacher, students or the learners can take part in the group discussion also. So this is the transactional modality of the teaching learning process of the learner-centered approach. Then classroom environment, and basically in learner-centered approach, the classroom environment is always in the form of democratic. Now these are the three main approaches of the teaching, learning, and or the curriculum development. Here we can explain again very two important, and in present situation they are using increasingly day-to-day situations. There are the competency-based approach and the constructivist approach. So what is the competency-based approach? In the competency-based approach, the more focus on the competency-based education. Is what is the competency-based education? Suppose when you are transacting any topic in the classroom, so you may ask yourself, have the students acquired the knowledge, understanding, and the skills that are expected from the learning the concept from the topics? Means whatever the topic you teach, so you should ask yourself also, should my students are acquire this knowledge, they are understanding very well, they have some kind of the skills. So you can ask yourself first and then start the teaching. If the expected learning outcomes are spelled in a concrete terms, that when we cannot only plan how to teach or facilitate students learning in order to attain the goal, but also assess and find the answer to the above question. Suppose you are asking yourself and you didn't get the answer, so you will explain the things again and you will answer of your question. And that time, means suppose one of the students cannot understand your teaching method, or that teaching method is not suitable for that particular student, so you can change the teaching method. You cannot change the student, but you can change the teaching method according to his psychology of the child, according to the need of that child. So this is the approach which is called as the competency-based approach or competency-based education. So what is competency? The competency is the most generic form in any underlying characteristics of an individual possesses and uses which leads to successful performance. A competency is a clearly defined and measurable activity. But who is completed by this activity? By the learner, or by, we can say, by the individual learner. So the competency, you can measure the competency of your students. So here the major focus on the competency-based education means students can read, students can calculate. So these are the competencies, and you can, through your teaching learning process, then after through teaching learning process, you can give some assignments. Through the assignments, through the various activities, you can measure the competency of the students. Means we can say that competency is clearly defined, it can be measured. Then away from the memorization, the competency-based approach keeps the learner away from the rote memorization. What the students learn today cannot forgotten tomorrow, as competencies are achieved by the learner at the level of mastery under the guidance of the teacher. The assessment of the competencies are directly linked with the objective of the learning experiences and are expected to be continuous and the competency based. And in the competency based approach, the teaching learning process is joyful. Why it is joyful? Because in the competency-based approach, there are the various activities to achieve the competencies like storytelling, role-playing, dialogue, quiz, puzzle. So all these activities are help the students to achieve the competency in the learner in a very friendly manner. That's why in the competency-based approach, teaching learning process is joyful and the interesting. The minimum levels of learning. The recommendation of the National Policy on Education 1996, that is the minimum level of learning, were laid down for primary school level in 3 school subjects, that is language, mathematics and the environmental studies for grade 1 to 5. The minimum level of learning were spelled out in terms of competencies arranged in a hierarchical manner linking with the subject areas across the grades. The mastery of each competency was required from each learner before moving to the competency in the hierarchy. Therefore, the mastery learning strategy employing various methods whichever recommended with the aim of attaining the minimum level as defined by the competencies. Then last approach is the constructivist approach. In the constructivist approach, what is constructivist approach? We already learned in a teacher-centered classroom, the students are passive listeners, but in the learner-centered approach, students are active listeners. The same thing happens in the constructivist approach. Constructivist learning and the teaching consider student as an active learner and teacher is the facilitator, the process of knowledge construction by the students. As the constructivist classroom is a learner-centered classroom and maximum freedom is given to the students. So let us go one by one. Here what is the purpose of constructivist approach? Here is the purpose is very important. Student empowerment is the central point. Constructivist classroom help the students to construct the knowledge on their own. And teaching learning style, here the student and the teachers are, students provide the teacher role is as a facilitator and the students are the active in nature. In constructivist approach, practice gives the more important. Transactional modality, the students perform tasks in an individual as well as in the group and the teacher acts as a facilitator. Sharing is important because the students are work together into a group. So that time the sharing is very important. Students are share their experiences related to that practical work. And the classroom environment is always a democratic in nature. Students are working in the group and they asking the question to one another. and if they are not satisfied with being in a group, so they can directly ask the teacher and take the solution of that problem. So here the project work is very important. In the constructivist approach, the students relate their previous experiences to the new situation. They make a sense of the story. They contribute their own ideas. They ask the question to each another and think why they link the characteristics. So all these are required, all these processes are required in the construction of knowledge. And that's why this approach is the constructivist approach. And the constructivist approach is based on the theory of constructivist learning theory. All of you know this, the constructivist learning theory. I cannot go detail with this constructivist theory. So here also the in the constructivist approach, the environment is democratic, the activities are interactive and the student center. The teacher facilitates a process of learning in which the students are encouraged to do the task actively as a responsible member of that group, and lastly they complete their project work within a given time. So this is about the constructivist approach. Now I sum up this session. We studied the 5 approaches of curriculum development: teacher-centered, subject-centered, learner-centered, competency-based, and the constructivist approach. In teacher-centered approach, knowledge is transmitted from the teacher to the students. In the subject-centered approach, the focus is on the delivery of the subject content by the teacher for students to acquire the knowledge. The competency-based approach keeps the learner away from the memorization. And the constructivist approach is a learner-centered approach. Maximum freedom is given to the students. Points for reflections: observe at least 2 classes on teacher-centered approach and list the characteristics. List the activities based on the learner-centered approach. And organize field trips based on the constructivist approach. And these are my references. You can visit my channel also, Dr. Sunita Magre lecture series, so you will get more and more videos on the various subjects. Thank you very much.